Hey everyone, I'm Dan Sege from Hydro Ottawa, and I'll be hosting the ThinkEnergy podcast. So here's today's big question. Are you looking to better understand the fast-changing world of energy? Join me every 2 weeks and get a unique perspective from industry leaders as we deep dive and discuss some of the coolest trends, emerging technologies, and latest innovations that drive the energy sector. So stay tuned as we explore some traditional and some quirky facets of this industry. This is the ThinkEnergy podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the ThinkEnergy podcast. Canada's climate plan has put the country on track to not only meet but exceed its 2030 Paris Agreement emissions reduction goals. What's more, Canada is moving entirely to net zero emissions by 2050. A lot of Canadians embrace this approach, citing the environment and climate change as major factors. But there are some that will require a heavier lift than others to achieve these future net zero targets. For some, that means planning now. The Paris Agreement target is less than 10 years away, and 2050 isn't so far into the future as it sounds. With only 3 decades to go, the finish line is closer than we think. The International Energy Agency released a report stating that these goals will require rapid scaling of energy efficiency, renewable energy, and electrification. The Government of Canada has introduced new funding and new initiatives to help support the commercial sector, promising $3 billion to establish a net zero accelerator fund to help large emitters reduce their emissions. The pandemic has given all of us the opportunity to rethink our energy habits, lifestyles, our impacts on the environment, and of course, how we work. Think of all these office towers that have sat empty for more than a year and the discussions that are being had about the viability of remote work versus returning to the office. A lot of companies and industries are in uncharted territory. Will tenants return to those office towers? Add to this the expectation to meet emission targets by making investments in their properties, and there's a lot of uncertainty, but perhaps also opportunity. So here's today's big question. How do we future-proof commercial properties and other industries that are large emitters for the net zero future? Our guest today is the manager of energy services for Envari, a subsidiary of Hydro Ottawa, which offer large-scale sustainable energy solutions for businesses, governments, and other utilities. Dear listeners, please welcome my friend Glen Mooney. Glen, this race to reach net zero emissions by 2050 seems like a mission tailor-made for the expertise and services of your organization. Perhaps you can start by telling us a bit about yourself, what drew you to your current role, and what does Envari do?
Sure, Dan, thanks. I'm kind of the old guy, so I've been around the energy business for a long time. I started way back in the nuclear world. So I actually worked at the Bruce at one point, and then I moved into energy efficiency, sustainability. I worked for the old Ontario Hydro. I worked in performance contracting for a while. So energy management's always been a path that I followed, and it's kind of brought us here. So I was actually here at the start of Envari, or what used to be Energy Ottawa Energy Services. So we got to kind of build a business around just needs in the business world, with supporting customers in areas that they didn't have support in. So I like to call it concept to commissioning. So we do anything that's energy or sustainability related. We do from the analyzation side to studies, but we really love to build projects. So that's kind of where we go. We commission projects. We do work in a lot of fields, energy, electric vehicles, battery storage, lots of lighting, tons of lighting, HVAC, building automation, anything sustainability or energy or greenhouse gas data, analytics and presentation. We build generation projects. So we touch pretty much anything that is energy or resources, so electricity, natural gas, water, steam. We've been involved in that.
Now, Glen, what's the first piece of advice you would give to municipalities, large commercial property owners, and those in large industries about these emission reduction target dates of 2030 and 2050?
That's something I think a lot about these days. And as a person that's been doing this for a little bit longer than some, 2030 is not that far away. That's 9 years away. So if somebody's giving you some targets for 9 years from now, you better be thinking about it now. And 2050, that's not that far away either. If we think back to Y2K or 9/11, that wasn't that long ago. So it doesn't take long to cover 20 years. So when we're making our decisions, we need to be thinking about that.
We know the final goal is net zero by 2050. That can seem like a huge hurdle for some, but with 3 decades to get there, it's more of a journey. Where do they begin? Let's look at this through maybe a strategy lens, planning, forecasting, and investments.
Yeah, and I guess the best thing is just think it through, make it part of the new vocabulary, because it's something that we haven't thought about. And I'll be honest, we've all kind of pushed it off a bit. We know it's been coming. We've talked about it coming for quite a while, but we don't want to overreact on it, but we need to make it part of our thought process. So any decisions that we have to do in our buildings that involve, I'll say something mechanical, things that building equipment, if you're making decisions on it, factor in these target dates of 2030 or 40 or 50 or whatever it is in your world or your owner's world or your shareholder's world, and make it part of your planning process. Every time you take a look at something and you have to make a business decision on it, think about it, stay in tune, get informed, get some help if you need it, but help make wise decisions, because you only get one chance to do it right now.
What's a good game plan to adopt now that will get results but also save them money in the long run? Is it benchmarking and setting actionable, achievable goals that can be done along the way?
Absolutely. Just have a game plan. Set yourself out a roadmap. It doesn't all have to be done this year. But a lot of times the goals are getting set for us. So our owners or pension funds that own buildings or shareholders or governments or whatever institution, whoever we work for, whoever's setting our marching orders, they're setting our goals for us. We don't want to get behind that ball. We want to be up in front of it. So find out where we are. Let's get some help qualifying the impact of the options that you have before you. If you've got something, as I said earlier, you've got a piece of equipment that needs to be changed for whatever reason, figure out what the impact of it is. And it's a different business model right now. It may not always be that best cost solution or best payback solution, but we need to take a look at it, plan it out, and avoid what they call lock-in. If you replace something today like for like, and it doesn't fit into your carbon plan for the future, you've probably made a 20-year decision. So that piece of equipment is going to last 20 or 25 years. So you don't get to make that decision again. So you've kind of locked in that missed opportunity for 20 or 25 years. So if you do the math on that, now we're talking 2040, 2045. So if people are putting pressure on you to reduce your greenhouse impact and you're putting in equipment that is just like for like and not moving sticks, then those are things we need to think out. A big part of the carbon world is just, it's reducing greenhouse gases. So a lot of times natural gas is a great fuel. It's not as great for climate as maybe electricity is, because we live in a very low carbon electricity world in Ontario here. So it's finding ways to maybe do better. And I'm not suggesting replacing gas boilers with electric boilers, because you probably can't make the business case for it, but you may want to look at things, we can talk about them, heat pumps, things like that use electricity more efficiently. Or use less gas. So that's one of the things too, is always the less you use of it, the less you pay for, the less impact you have on the climate world.
Okay, Glen, what types of investments would you recommend from the owners of Canada's largest commercial real estate properties and from municipalities? What should they invest in now versus later?
Well, that's actually the heat pump one was a good example. And they don't fit everywhere. There's no one solution for this. It's just think about it. What are my options? So but the other side of that equation are what are natural gas prices going to be? So the federal government's been pretty clear that they're moving up the carbon price on natural gas to $170 a ton by 2030. That's not that far out. So what impact is that going to have on the natural gas impact? Because you're probably basing your decisions right now on what natural gas prices are today. You need to look at what they might be in the future. There is a focus on electrification. So what can I do to use electricity more efficiently in my building and maybe less carbon negative products, if you want to use that term. So things like the heat pumps, envelope opportunities, making your envelope using less, sealing things up, better automation, controlling your building more so that you're only using the energy you need to do the purpose it's intended to, new HVAC approaches. So those might be challenging business cases, but get some help making those decisions.
Now, looking for some tips, Glen, what are some untapped or low-hanging fruit options that folks either haven't thought about or considered that you would recommend?
I always go to if you don't need to use it, use less of it. So that's the number one thing. The cheapest option is the pure conservation one. Take a really good look at how you use energy in all forms and find out ways that you can reduce the amount of energy you use. Things like lighting, still a good option. It's like LEDs, more efficient lighting, turning lights off when people aren't in spaces. HVAC, managing your automation system so that you're not using energy in hours that the building's unoccupied. We still need HVAC. We need to provide air, and there's a lot of focus on that these days with the whole COVID situation, but use it wise. Other technologies are coming along. I keep kind of going back to heat pumps. They may be a more expensive option right now, but we're seeing a lot of movement in costing and we're seeing a lot of movement in performance. So there maybe is a good business case to look at some of the newer technologies like that.
Great segue here. Certainly, technology changes quickly, but there's a lot of tech that exists today that can help building owners and municipalities prepare for the future. What are some out-of-the-box ways that today's technology can help?
I keep harping on cold climate heat pumps. We've done a lot of work with them lately, and just the performance levels in even the last 3, 4, 5 years, they've improved, and they're being built for a Canadian environment. We're not your typical environment globally. We're -30, -40 at some days in the wintertime. And what we're finding is we're getting these heat pumps are starting to perform well at -20, even -30, some of them even at -30. Sorry, -25 and -30. So we're getting a lot more efficiency out of these products. And I think with adoption, we're going to start to see the pricing come down. They already have quite a bit right now. And there's some really good technologies out there right now.
Glen, the Government of Canada has just introduced new funding and new initiatives to help support the commercial sector, promising $3 billion to establish a netzero accelerator fund to help large emitters reduce their emissions. What are some of the highlights and what should clients know?
So great programs in this. There's quite a few out. Even in the last month, I've seen about 3 or 4 announcements of different programs for different applications. So great programs, a lot of money on the table. Those are billions, not millions. So that B is a big factor. So I think it's going to drive a lot of change. I think there'll be more programs coming as well, and they tend to be more sector specific or industry specific or building type. So you're going to start to see more tailored programs, I think, coming out. Bottom line, know what you want to do, have your roadmap in place, plan for it, get a little bit of help. The one thing we are finding with a lot of these incentive programs is there needs to be a really good justification built at the start of it, which may take a little bit of energy modeling, creating a benchmark that they can actually assign the performance part of the incentive to. So that's quite often a little intimidating for customers. So that's one thing that we've spent a lot of time doing. They are usually post-project incentives. So you do need to put the capital aside. It's call it a rebate or an incentive after the fact. So you want to make sure that you've done everything properly. You don't want to jeopardize the incentive. So read closely. There's some pretty good programs out there.
Now, can you give us some examples of work Envari is doing and how you've helped clients reduce their energy usage and save money?
Yeah, sure. We're spending a lot of time right now doing deep retrofit. So a deep retrofit is to go into a building, look at every way that it uses energy, find out how to reduce the amount of energy. So you need to, in a lot of cases, get at least a 25% reduction, which is a challenge. That's not easy. Also looking at what can I do with fuels to get more climate friendly, reduce the footprint, and then reduce the GHG. So a deep retrofit, it starts with a study. It has to be integrated. Everybody has to be involved because it does affect operations in a lot of cases too. So you need everybody at the table to work through it. It is a big process, and it looks at things like the envelope, things like heating and cooling. So we've done a lot of work with electric boilers. And again, not that you need to replace everything with an electric boiler, but there may be places where a smaller electric boiler serves a purpose, and it can be maybe dispatched on price signals when it's cheaper, or to run an electric boiler and makes sense to run it, then run it. Things like the heat pumps everywhere. Heat pumps are they're kind of a unique thing because they provide you heat, but they also provide you cooling. So the air conditioning is part of that. But they also allow you to move heat around. So in commercial spaces or institutional spaces, heat pumps quite often can take heat from one area, put it somewhere else, or take cool and put it somewhere. So it can be a whole ecosystem in and of itself in a building. We're doing 3 schools right now where it's driven by ventilation improvements based on COVID, but the heat pumps are there. We're offsetting baseboard heat with the heat pumps. We're adding cooling to a lot of spaces that didn't have room, which is ideal in schools. We're putting in a lot of energy recovery ventilators or heat recovery ventilators. So let's not waste that heat. Let's not dump it outside. We need the fresh air, but let's use the heat that's in that air, not let it leave the building, so that we're maximizing as much as we can. And that's all underpinned by a building automation system. So a lot of emphasis on good building automation, proper schedules, proper strategies. Do everything you can to use as little as you can. And then lighting, we do a ton of lighting, indoor lighting, outdoor lighting. It's a big part.
Okay, let's now fast forward to post-pandemic. What is your prediction for commercial real estate? Will people return to the office towers downtown like before? Ultimately, what do you hope these emission targets will achieve for companies and municipalities? Will they be required to innovate, plan for a sustainable future, and control costs?
All of the above. It's going to be a challenge. We're in such a strange time right now. It's obviously it starts with a lot more awareness of ventilation in your buildings. We didn't talk that much about it before. We just assumed that we had lots of fresh air, but COVID has really highlighted that and put a spotlight on it. So I think building owners have they need to pay a lot of attention to that, because I think their tenants or their users or the community, whoever's in their buildings, are demanding that. And it's going to be a struggle to balance those dollars, because we've lost opportunities over the last year. We've incurred a lot of costs over the last year. Now society is asking for us to spend more and more money to green our fleet of buildings and add more value to our shareholder. Our shareholder want to see us reduce our carbon footprints as well. So it's going to be a lot of planning, and that's the thing is. Everybody needs some help. There's a lot out there. I don't think anybody has all of the answers. I certainly don't, but I think it's going to take a little bit more thinking than we've kind of ridden through in the last few decades with just in general with energy management. And again, I can't stress enough, be careful with your decisions. Do not lock in equipment for 20 or 25 years and lose an opportunity to meet your long-term goals.
Okay, Glen, what's exciting you right now about the energy management and energy solutions industry?
It's just really disruptive right now. It's a challenge to balance energy efficiency with electrification. It's counterintuitive at times. Like it opposes each other. You've got, use less, use cheapest, reduce greenhouse gases. Just so many variables out there now that we're all trying to manage. It's not an easy task. And the landscape, it's changing, and it's going to change for the next few decades. I've done energy management for about 30 years. So I've kind of seen progression from, I started in the days they said go electric, which is what is old is new again. But what they meant there is get your oil furnace out and go to an electric furnace. Well, go electric now has a totally different meaning to it. So the other thing is 2030. A lot of goals are set for 2030. That's only 9 years out. And if anybody's been working for a few years, 9 years flies by very quickly.
Okay, we're just about done here, Glen. How about we close off with some rapid fire questions?
Ready to go.
Glen, what is your favorite word?
Oh, geez. I don't know if I have that. I know a lot of words that through COVID I haven't been crazy about, like pivot and something to do with COVID. I guess just optimism. I like people that are optimistic. I like when people use that word, and that's a driving force behind what they're trying to do.
Now, what is the one thing you can't live without?
Early on in COVID or working from home, I bought noise canceling headphones, and I can't believe how valuable they have become in so many different aspects of my life, not just sitting in front of my computer for work, but going for a walk and just listening to music and just drowning out street noise.
I like that. What is something that challenges you?
I'll make it recent. COVID, I find with COVID, not just me, I think everybody, there's just so many balls up in the air. And I think the biggest thing is just try not to drop too many of them. You're going to drop some of them, pick them up as quick as you can and get it repaired.
Now, Glen, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Probably not to bore people. I find, listening teaches us a lot more than talking. And I guess I'm always trying to be cognizant of that. I'd rather listen to what people say than to always pound my opinion on them.
And if you could turn back time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell him?
People that you always think that don't get it, people like I am right now, they've actually seen a lot. They've learned a lot. They've tried a lot of things. They're not as dumb as you may think they are. But the other side of that is don't grow old and cynical, because that's the one thing I've really tried to avoid. Keep learning. Like I have 18 great nieces and nephews, and I learn more from them than I learned from most people in my life. So stay young, have fun.
Okay, and lastly, what do you currently find most interesting about your sector?
Change. I've done energy management for over 30 years. I have never seen a rate of change like there is right now. And right behind it is a rate of technology development for energy storage. Electric vehicles are coming. We're all seeing that come quick. Discussions like we've just had, we now have to rethink how we do things in our buildings and in our life. Things are changing very quickly. It's going to be a fun next decade.
Well, Glen, we've reached the end of another episode of the ThinkEnergy podcast. If somebody wanted to connect, what is the best way?
Our website, Envari.com. Please reach out. Always happy to chat.
Thank you for joining us today. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode of the ThinkEnergy podcast. For past episodes, make sure you visit our website, hydroottawa.com/podcasts. Lastly, if you found value in this podcast, be sure to subscribe. Anyway, this podcast is a wrap. Cheers, everyone.